She didn't know his name, not really. Just remembered the warmth of his voice over the rain and the soft creak of his old truck's heater as it kicked on that night. The night everything in her life began to change. You ever have a moment where two strangers cross paths and it feels like fate paused to whisper, "Pay attention. This one matters." Yeah, that was the night. If you believe kindness can still exist in a world that often forgets it, go ahead and like this video and hit subscribe, because this story might just prove that a single act of decency can ripple into something none of us saw coming. It started with the storm, one of those early November tempests that rolls in hard and sudden, the kind that slaps against your windshield like it's got something to prove. Drew Carter had just finished patching a leaking water line under a cranky old Ford Explorer when the rain hit, hard and cold, slicking the cracked pavement of his small-town repair lot into a mirror of muddied stars. He was bone-tired, soaked to the knees, and just trying to make it home before his kids' chicken nuggets went cold. But as he turned onto Riverbend Drive, he spotted a battered minivan half-slumped onto the curb, hazards blinking like a dying heartbeat, and a woman crouched beside it in scrubs, her dark ponytail plastered to her neck, one arm shielding a coughing child wrapped in a too-thin hoodie. He could have kept driving. God knows he had enough of his own problems. But Drew had this flaw, see? He didn't know how to not help. It wasn't heroism, not in his eyes. Just muscle memory from years of being the guy who couldn't walk past someone stranded. So he pulled over, rolled the window down, and leaned out with that easy, unassuming calm that made even anxious people breathe easier. "Need a lift?" he asked, and her eyes, sharp, tired, but proud, narrowed like she wasn't sure whether to trust him. She was holding a little girl, maybe 6, maybe 7, and the kid's lips were tinged blue at the edges. "Car died. My phone's dead too," the woman muttered, like admitting that much scraped at her dignity. Drew nodded. "Let me help. Truck's warm. I got a kid too. I get it." Something in the way he said it made her pause, then nod, just once. She climbed in slowly, cautious but desperate, and he cranked the heat as she cradled her daughter in the passenger seat. For the first mile they didn't talk, just listened to the rain hammering the roof. Then the little girl, Lily, she said her name was, let out a low, wet cough that made Drew glance over. "She's sick?" he asked. "Flu. Maybe bronchitis. I couldn't miss another shift, or I'd lose my job." The woman's voice cracked as she said it. Drew didn't pry. He just turned the defrost up and offered Lily the backup hoodie he kept stashed behind the seat for his own boy, Noah. When they reached her address, an aging apartment complex with cracked siding and flickering porch lights, Drew helped carry Lily up the steps while Rachel fumbled for her keys with shaking hands. She didn't ask for his number, didn't even say thank you the way people usually do. She just looked at him with this haunted gratitude, like she wasn't used to being helped, and said, "I owe you." And Drew, without missing a beat, said, "You don't owe me anything. Just get her warm." Then he left, but she stayed with him. The way she held her daughter like a shield, the way her voice wobbled when she spoke, the way she didn't ask for anything, even when it was clear she needed more than she could carry. Back at home, Drew microwaved nuggets for Noah and told himself he'd forget about the woman with the broken van. But that night, he pulled her license plate from memory, cross-checked it in the small-town garage database, and arranged for a tow to his shop. Quietly, without asking, the van needed more than just a jump. It needed new belts, plugs, a full overhaul. Drew didn't bill her. He logged it as a canceled order and stayed late 3 nights fixing it himself. Something about her stuck with him. Not just her, but the fight in her. He'd seen that same kind of grit in himself after Maddie, his wife, passed 3 years ago. Cancer doesn't care how old your kid is. Doesn't care if you're still paying off the crib. Grief carves you out and leaves you hollow, but it also gives you eyes to see others who are drowning the same way you did. So when he dropped the keys off with the leasing office and left a sticky note on her door that said, "Van's outside. All set. Stay safe, D." He didn't sign his last name. Didn't want thanks. Didn't want attention. And definitely didn't want her to know that under that flannel jacket and oil-stained shirt was a man who owned 4 garages and a patent that sold to an auto giant for 7 figures 5 years ago. Drew Carter didn't look like a millionaire. He didn't want to. Not since losing Maddie. All he wanted was to fix cars, raise his boy, and keep his head down. But fate, it seems, had other plans. Because 2 weeks later, that same woman, Rachel, walked into his shop holding a tray of dollar store muffins and a hand-scribbled thank you note, and she still had no idea who he really was. It was the muffins that did it, not the fact that Rachel came back, that he could have predicted, maybe even hoped for in some quiet, guilty corner of his heart. But the tray of unevenly baked chocolate chip muffins she held in both hands like an offering to a god she didn't believe in. There was something so heartbreakingly human about it. About her showing up in Scruggs with a wrinkled paper note and nerves flickering in her eyes, trying to repay a kindness with what little she had. That Drew Carter felt a crack in his carefully built wall. "I didn't know where else to take these," she said, trying to smile. But her voice wobbled like a tightrope walker mid-step. "You fixed my van. You didn't even tell me. Why would you do that?" And Drew leaned against the open hood of a Silverado, sleeves rolled, grease on his forearm, just shrugged. Because it needed fixing. That was his whole answer. No fanfare. No speeches. Just the kind of grounded goodness that doesn't ask for applause. Rachel looked like she wanted to cry, or yell, or hug him. Instead, she offered him a muffin, which he accepted like it was a sacred object. "It's not charity," he added gently, like he could see the war inside her. "It's just, sometimes people need help. And sometimes it's okay to accept it." That moment turned into coffee 2 days later. Coffee turned into him picking Lily up from school one day when Rachel's shift ran late. That turned into Sunday afternoons at the park with both their kids running wild while they shared a bench and stories they didn't tell anyone else. She told him about Lily's father, about the bruises and the court dates and the fear that never quite left her bones. She told him how she'd once dreamed of becoming a trauma nurse before her life became its own kind of trauma. And Drew? He told her about Maddie. About watching the strongest woman he'd ever met waste away in a hospital bed, still cracking jokes with their toddler even as her body betrayed her. He told her about Noah and how raising him alone felt like climbing a mountain barefoot every day. He didn't tell her about the money, about the company he'd sold before Maddie got sick, about the real estate portfolio, about the financial advisor who still called once a quarter with updates he barely listened to. Because somehow, that part felt like a different life. Like something that belonged to a man who no longer existed. And he didn't want her seeing him through that lens. He wanted her to see him. Just a man with a wrench and a soft spot for little girls with backpacks too big for their bodies. But secrets, even noble ones, have a way of clawing through the cracks. It started with Lily's pediatric appointment. She needed follow-ups, expensive ones, and Rachel had been trying to juggle insurance denials like a circus act without a net. Drew made a quiet call to a specialist he knew, one who owed him a favor, and covered the cost himself. Told Rachel the doctor had a grant program, said it was no big deal. She didn't ask too many questions, not then. But then came the birthday party. Noah turned 8, and Rachel showed up at the modest garage-side barbecue Drew hosted, expecting hot dogs and store-bought cake. Instead, there was a full bounce house, a DJ playing 2000s hits, and goodie bags that looked like they were curated by a Pinterest influencer. "This wasn't cheap," she said, pulling Drew aside while the kids screamed joyfully in the background. "You keep saying you're a mechanic, but no mechanic I know does this." Drew shrugged, gave his trademark half-smile, and said, "I like to go big for my kid." But Rachel didn't let it go this time. Something had shifted. That night, after tucking Lily in, she did what she swore she never would. She searched his name online. What she found made her stomach turn. Articles, business journals, interviews. Local innovator sells Carter Auto Tech for $8.2 million. The garage mogul who walked away from fortune. Her fingers hovered over her phone all night, shaking. The next morning, she showed up at the shop, face pale and jaw tight, holding the phone up like a smoking gun. "You lied to me," she said, voice low and fierce. Drew looked up from the carburetor he was rebuilding, saw the storm in her eyes, and sighed like a man who knew this day would come. "I didn't lie," he said. "I just didn't tell you." "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Did you think I was going to start kissing your boots? Beg you to save me?" "No," Drew said softly. "I thought you'd look at me different. And I liked how you looked at me before." She stared at him, eyes shining with more than just anger. It was betrayal, sure, but also heartbreak. Because she'd started to trust him. Because, for a moment, she thought maybe this man, the one who helped without strings, might actually be real. Now, she wasn't so sure. "I don't need another man trying to fix me, Drew," she said. her voice trembling with the weight of everything she'd been through. I needed someone who saw me as an equal, not a charity case. Then she turned and walked out, slamming the shop door behind her so hard it rattled the windows, and left Drew staring into the dust she kicked up, holding the wrench in one hand and the invisible pieces of something breaking in the other. For 2 weeks, Rachel didn't return his calls, didn't answer his texts, didn't show up at the shop or the park or anywhere she might accidentally see Drew Carter again. And honestly, he didn't blame her. She'd been surviving so long with her fists up and her guard locked tight that the idea of someone helping without wanting something back probably felt more like a threat than a gift. But it wasn't until the legal envelope hit her mailbox that she realized life didn't wait for broken hearts to heal. Her ex had filed for full custody of Lily, citing unstable finances and living conditions unfit for a child. And just like that, she was right back in the nightmare she thought she'd escaped. She was staring down a courtroom she couldn't afford and a system that always seemed to favor the man with the cleaner record and deeper pockets. But when the court doors opened on hearing day, Rachel froze. There, sitting in the second row in a gray button-down shirt and worn boots, was Drew, clean-shaven, calm, and holding a thick manila folder in his lap. She tried to wave him off, to send the silent signal that she didn't need rescuing. But Drew didn't flinch. When the judge asked for witness testimony, he stood up like a man who'd been preparing his whole life for this one moment, and spoke with a quiet strength that silenced even the opposing attorney. "Rachel is the most resilient, selfless, devoted mother I've ever met," he said. "She works double shifts, skips meals for her kid, and still finds a way to smile through it. She's not unstable. She's unshakable." The courtroom fell silent. The judge leaned back, thoughtful, and when the final gavel came down, Rachel kept full custody. Afterward, in the courthouse parking lot, she stared at Drew through eyes blurred with disbelief. "Why'd you come?" she asked. Her voice was soft now, not sharp. "After everything I said, why show up?" Drew looked at her, and the answer came without hesitation. "Because it's not about what you said. It's about who you are, and who Lily needs. And because when I picked you up that night, I wasn't just helping a stranger. I was meeting someone who reminded me what it feels like to care again." She didn't say anything for a moment, just stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him like it was the most natural thing in the world. And maybe it was. Months passed. The healing came slow, but steady. Trust rebuilt itself like an old engine, temperamental, but fixable. Rachel started nursing classes again. Lily began calling Noah her almost brother. Drew still wore flannel, still worked with his hands, still lived like a man who'd given everything up. Only now, he'd given it away on purpose. Because real wealth, he realized, wasn't in stocks or cars or square footage. It was in watching 2 kids fall asleep on your shoulders during a backyard movie night, and holding someone's hand without either of you needing to say a word. And one afternoon, under a sky that couldn't decide between sun or rain, Rachel leaned over and kissed him without warning. "You still think I looked at you different?" she whispered against his lips. Drew smiled, pulling her closer. "Not anymore.